Welcome to the Culture of You, meaningful dialogue with me and my favorite people. All right, everyone. Welcome to the Culture of You. Today, I have one of my most favorite people in the world. And it's not just because her name is Karen. Karen Austin is a writer, editor, author, emotional intelligence, transformational leadership coach, grief counselor, one of my favorite people to externally process with and go on long walks in the woods. I could talk about anything with this woman. Karen Austin, you are an amazing person, and I can't wait for everybody to meet you. Thank you so much for being on here with me today. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited. We haven't seen each other in a while, and I miss you. So this is
I know.
exciting.
There's
And
been
I
so
know that
much going on.
we're gonna create something cool. So.
All right, cool. So my first question to you is, why did you come here? And when we talked about topics, you chose death and relationship to death as the topic. So tell me why you're here.
So death has been following me around since I was a child. And by child, I mean, like 12, 13. It has been kind of my constant companion, and I have learned to walk quite comfortably with it. And I didn't know, probably until I was 60, that that was why I was here. Like, I've always known I was here to change perspective, to teach, to be a wordsmith, to, get people to look at things in different ways. But until this whole death thing really grabbed me in my maturity, I didn't know that that was why I was here. That's the thing that makes people go, wait a minute, what?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, you don't look a day over 30, so I don't know what you're talking about,
Thank you.
60. So how would you describe your vibe? So this is the culture view. We talk about culture and how we create culture. And one thing I love about you is hanging out with you personally, but how would you describe your vibe as a person? We'll talk about work in a second, but how would you describe your vibe personally?
My personal vibe has I had this really interesting experience the other day where I was like, um, I don't even remember what I was doing. I had surgery in February, and I still have like surgery brain and drug brain some days. So I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
when did that happen? Was that a dream? Like, what? But I had this experience where I realized that the person that I am is the person that I have always been. But I think my vibe has changed. I think um, I think that I've always been sort of open, and I mean, people come to me.
Mm-hmm.
People just kind of come to me, and so I think I have a vibe that is open and welcoming
Mm-hmm.
and sort of mothery. People
Yes.
get that from me, um, and I'd say that's my current vibe. But I don't think that that's always been my vibe. I know, like in my 30s, when I was pissed off at my son's dad and all the other men in the world, like I had a pretty, strong force field where I wasn't welcoming.
Mm-hmm.
But my vibe now is just, I'm a welcoming earth mother crone kind of thing. Yeah.
I think that's why I had you on in May. It was like the mothery, nurturing, loving earth mother energy. Um, and so how would you describe, like, as a professional writer, editor, author, that kind of thing? You can even put grief counselor and, like, transformational leadership coach in there. But how would you explain, like, the culture that you try to create as a professional?
Same. I
Hmm.
am who I am in any situation. If I'm doing a grief group, I'm going to read the room before I decide what my demeanor is going to be. But typically, it's there's a people trust me,
Hmm.
and so they trust me with their words, with their secrets, with their grief, with their hearts. And I think that that is what I try to create in all my situations. When
Mhm.
I'm working with an author, so say I'm ghostwriting a book for someone,
Mhm.
they're trusting me with their lives, with their whole whatever it is they want to put out into the world, they're trusting me with that. And I'll tell you, one of my clients said, "You're like Oprah with a book at the end."
Yeah.
So there's, it's that kind of vibe. I've never
Yeah.
really understood why we change
Mm.
personally and professionally. Like when I was a kid and I started working, and I was like, wait, I'm supposed to be somebody different at work than I am in my real life, and I never really understood that, so I didn't ever really play in it.
Mm. That's so interesting because I'm like thinking about, best self, and I never really use that language. I say favorite self, but it sounds like you've already described like your favorite self. Like, is that when you're like, okay, I love myself by myself? That's how I think of favorite self. Like, when do I love myself by myself? Like, what characteristics? And you're a realist, you know what I mean? Like, you're honest. Whatever is showing up, you're going to talk about that and be that way. But is that like when you're at your favorite, when you're nurturing and you're able to hold space for others?
That is my favorite space to be. Yes.
Hmm.
And I've also had to really learn to hold space for myself. Well, for the last few years, but really a lot this year.
Can you talk more into that?
Yeah. So I was diagnosed with lung cancer at Christmas
Hmm.
and had surgery in February, had my left upper lobe removed. And to like hold space, like I held space for cancer.
Mm.
And I like am asking it questions, and I'm like, I have decided that I had cancer. I don't have it anymore.
Hmm.
The doctors recommended chemo. I said no.
Right.
So that's holding space for myself in a way that I've never been required to do before.
Mm. It's
It's been
interesting
very
because you're like, is cancer like an entity as well? And like now that it's gone, like what does that mean for a relationship with yourself, having like, in a sense, healed yourself and like gotten surgery and removed it? What does that look like?
well. I
Your
had to ask
grace.
my body. Here's the first thing that came up. Like when I was first that we first started following this, like the February before. It was one of those things that showed up like randomly on an X-ray. The doctor said, "Let's follow it."
Hmm.
I look back at my records, and the thing's been in there since 2019.
Oh, wow.
I don't know how you feel about quantum science, but it didn't start growing until we started watching it, and
Mm.
so it grew. And
Wow.
I was certain it was not cancer. Like I was like, nope, they're gonna get in there, and it's just gonna be like some scar tissue. And so my gut said, man, it's not cancer, and it kept saying that. And my friends' guts are saying the same thing,
Mhm.
and that so I was kind of like sidelined when the test came back and said it was cancer, and I was like, okay, so how do I trust my gut now?
Wow.
And so that has been a process of getting back to a place where I can trust my gut, because I couldn't have decided to not have chemo without trusting my gut.
Yeah.
So
And
how to hold space for like all of that and be present to it and not give in to pressure. There's this societal pressure to do what the doctor said.
yeah.
And that was, can kind of be difficult to do that in the world.
Mm. And I know you went, you know, back and forth, and we've talked about this, and this is a quote that I want to give to you and see what you say about it. But you were like, no one's getting out of here alive. And because we were talking back and forth about kind of which way you were going to approach it, and one foot being in for life and one foot being out. And so, like, with that thought process, which I'm sure you're like, at that point, I wasn't trusting my gut, right? So that's what I'm hearing. Like, how did you come from the notion of like, okay, I'm not getting out of this thing alive, life, to like, I have one foot out, one foot in? Like, can you talk through that a little bit?
Yeah. So Tracy died. My husband died in 2017,
Mhm.
and we had a we had a brutally beautiful, horrible experience while he was dying.
Yeah.
Um, and so learning to be alone um, was a whole new curve for me. And then, excuse me, COVID hit, and you know, I really I believe that when Tracy died, I lost a mirror
Mm.
that he was a mirror. When someone loves you unconditionally, it's a different kind of mirror than the one you give yourself, right?
Right.
So I lost that mirror, and then COVID hit, and I lost all my mirrors. And so I did a lot of dark work. I did a lot of shadow work during
Mhm.
COVID. And then January 6th happened and like put me down. It just put
Mm.
me down for a while. And I had been 1 foot in and 1 foot out since then. Kind of like,
Mhm.
don't really care if I'm here. Still engaged in life, still doing my work and all of that stuff, but just not with all that much enthusiasm. So when this came up, I was like, well, I love my therapist. She said, I told her what was going on, and I told her about being 1 foot in and 1 foot out, which she knew, but she goes, why don't you just fucking get lung cancer and die then? And I was like, exactly. Like
She
that's
said that
where
before you got the diagnosis?
yeah.
Oh
I
my
mean, we were talking
God.
about it because I had this thing,
Yeah.
but she just called me out. She's like, "Well, okay, you know."
Oh wow.
So then I had to make a decision. Like, if I'm going to go through
Mhm.
surgery to have a lobe removed, which, excuse me, I'm 60. I'll be 66 in a month. This surgery, I've had both knees replaced, had an
Mhm.
ovary removed, had my shoulder fixed. This surgery is a bitch,
Mm.
and I had to tell myself, if I'm going through that, I better be both feet in.
Right.
So I don't know what both feet in looks like every day, but it is a conversation that I'm having with myself. I have a wellness joy coach that I'm working with to see if we can get me to a place where I'm joyful and in peace. Yeah. And
That's
be
funny. You're
both
like, where
foot
I'm joyful. You know what I mean? Like
be
the
both feet
resentfully
in.
joyful.
Damn it.
So what's hard for you in relationship with others? And I know we could talk about dating too if you want. Like I know it's
Hmm.
been not
Hmm.
great. But like
But interesting.
it's been interesting, but not great. 1 out of 10 would recommend, right? But like how has that looked for you, like in relationship with others? What's been really hard in relationship with others, especially when like you do all this grief work, all this death work, when you see someone who is struggling, like does that impact who you are in relationship with, like friends, family, everybody?
Ask me more in a different way.
So when you see that what's your biggest struggle? Because a lot of folks right now, I would say, are energy, nervous systems activated. A lot of people are 1 foot in, 1 foot out.
Yep,
People are really struggling right now. And so,
absolutely.
as you choose the people that you spend time with and spend energy with, what's like the most challenging thing that you have to deal with, or even like with discernment, you have to decide not to. But like, what's the thing that makes you not be in relationship with someone?
Okay, okay, I hear you.
Mhm.
I would say people who are unwilling to take responsibility for their own lives, who are um I'm people who play in the they,
Mhm.
that they did it.
Right.
I have a Tracy used to carry this card in his wallet that it was a quote from this coach named Charles
Mhm.
Swindoll, and it said, I'm convinced that life is 10% what happens to me and 90% how I react to it. And so it's those people who are um, unwilling to take responsibility for their own shit and also who are unkind.
I'm with that. Yes,
Yeah, I
that
can't
deeply
I can't be
resonates.
around unkind people.
Mhm. And so as you move through this, like what is your work consistently? So you talked about shadow work a little bit. I'm realizing for me right now, a lot of my work is around not being resentful for like my gifts, right? Or not being like when I hold space, if I hold space really well and that's a gift, obviously not to have to do it all the time, but like not being resentful around that and being in right relationship with folks and like taking accountability and also like acknowledging when stuff is not mine too.
Mhm.
Like that's my work. What is your like work at this phase or time in your life?
So here's what I decided that all in looked like for me.
Mhm.
Excuse me. I decided that I can't do more than three things at a time. So I'm choosing to be in connection.
Mm.
Like I think that that's been lacking for all of us. I think that um, it's been it's super easy to be safe and in the house. So if I'm going to have a long room ripped out and I'm going to like step into the world and do whatever the thing is, um, I want to be connected. I want to be loved,
Mm.
and I want experience. So loving myself is the beginning of that. Um, and so one of the things that happened with the surgery is that there's this thing, and I just learned that it had a name last week. I've been in stupid pain
Mhm.
since the surgery. The pain has not gone away. Um, Most of us are aware that the medical community is not super good at explaining everything.
No.
I think there's a whole lot there.
Mhm.
But so I have this thing called um, post thoracotomy pain syndrome. Yeah.
Mm.
Um, so I had a series of injections on Monday to see if that'll help with it. I've been on meds, but the point is, like, I'm in pain 24/7. It's
Mm.
uncomfortable for me to walk. It's uncomfortable for me to do much except sit with a pillow under my arm. And so my couch has become like a rotating place for people.
Mm.
Like I sit on my end of the couch and then friends come over and sit on their end.
Mhm.
And I've had, I don't know, 15 or 20 people on the end of my couch recently. Come on over, sit down and talk. I want connection. I want to
Mhm.
create more connection. Um, so that's been cool. Also, um, looking for experience. I've always been an experiencer. I think that's part of the reason I came here was just, I often say that, we come to be embodied so we can feel, so we can touch,
Mhm.
so we can taste, so we can have all of those senses. And then we spend our whole lives trying not to feel anything. So
Right.
so I want to experience and I don't care what that looks like. I don't, it doesn't matter to me what it is. I
Mhm.
just want to go out into the world and experience something. Like Matthew, my son, and I went on Sunday. I have this kind of ridiculous side yard that I start when COVID hit. I started to collect things that make me laugh
Mhm.
and put them outside in my yard. So and, as you can imagine, things don't survive very well out in
Yeah.
the elements in the rain in Ohio.
Mhm.
So periodically, I have to replace that stuff. So Matthew and I went out shopping on Sunday to find things that make me laugh and like that
Antique
kind.
shopping or where do you go?
We thrift.
That's fun.
People have some stuff that you walk along you walk along the shelf and if I start laughing, it comes home with me.
I love that.
That like I want those experiences. I as you said, none of us are getting out of here alive.
Mhm.
When Tracy was dying, we never talked about, I wish we hadn't done this, or I wish we hadn't done that.
Right.
There was never any talk of that. There was never any regret. And I want to go that same way. Whether I go now or 10 years from now, this has been
Hmm.
a real awakening for me to look at life differently and
Hmm.
also to be forced to sit on the couch while I did it.
I feel like pain changes you. Like I have a torn labrum in my hip, and I've pretty much gone in and out of my life like with different. I always had the injuries that you could play through.
Hmm.
So like have high pain
Suck it up.
tolerance.
Hmm.
Yeah, stress fractures, that kind of thing.
Hmm.
Um, but like I feel like pain changes you. Like it definitely changes your outlook, your perspective, and it's like so much work to show up kindly and like stuff that would normally come naturally to you when you're in pain consistently.
So I agree with you. I do think it changes you. I think it can change you for the better,
Mm,
um, or for the different, for maybe mm, uh, a different way of presenting yourself to the world. One of the things that's happened with this pain is that, um, I've done a lot of grief work. I've done a lot of work around emotional pain.
mhm,
I know how to work with my emotional pain.
right.
I know exactly what to ask it. I know exactly how to move it through me. Like, I know all that stuff. So when this physical pain came up, I was like, first I was mad,
Yeah.
you know. I was mad, I was grievy. Um, and then I started thinking, okay, wait. So I wonder if I can work with physical pain the same way I work with emotional pain.
Okay.
And so I was working with my coach, my joy coach. Teach me how to have joy. Um, and so we were talking about that, because with emotional pain, I would be like, okay, there it is. Um, what's it trying to teach me? What
Mhm,
can I learn from it? How do I move it through me? What does it want? So I started to ask those same questions of my physical pain.
mhm,
And my physical pain lives right under my left breast and around the side.
mhm.
So we're sitting there. We were doing um, meditation. We were doing a breathing exercise. We were getting ready to go into Reiki, and we had this conversation, my joy coach and I, about pain and if I can work with physical pain the same way I work with emotional pain. So I'm I'm in meditation. I'm in relationship to what's going on in my body. I'm breathing, and all of a sudden I get this like it was a zing of energy. That's the only way I know how to describe it.
Mhm.
That went from under my left breast and up to my head,
Oh, wow.
and it said in a voice. I didn't actually hear the voice. I felt the voice. I felt the words.
Mhm.
It said, "I am temporary. If I was not here, you would not be resting."
Ouch.
Yeah.
Like, oh,
So I was like, "Oh,
I'd be
uh,
out here doing too much, 2 feet
how
in.
many times that lesson come up?" You know.
Mm,
So so that has given me, like, I'm great at giving other people permission to be in their shit, but I'm not so great at giving myself permission to be in my own shit. So that has
yeah.
given me an opportunity to just be like, okay, your body's asking for kindness. Your body's asking for you to pay attention. Your body's asking you to rest. You had a lung ripped out.
Like a whole load.
Hmm.
Mm,
Yeah. So, so I think pain does change you,
mhm.
and like anything else, it changes you. You work with it,
Yes.
or you don't,
Or it drives you,
or it
and I
drives
think
you.
sometimes a lot of
Yeah.
people will let pain, emotional or physical, drive them in their behaviors. And that's I think the work is always to try and get back in the driver's seat of our behaviors and how we treat each other. My cat just came up and hung out. So I figured that was going to happen, especially with you and your
What's your cat's name?
closeness to death.
Temple.
Temple Ladia.
Hi,
um,
Temple.
inherited cat, but you might have seen her tail a little bit. We
I
got
saw
blurred background.
something.
Yeah, that was a little tail. Um, she's the mascot, obviously, for the Ohio Rest Collective. Um, but she's a little shamany, and so I was waiting for her to come for this conversation. Um, as a collective, if you were to, speak words of wisdom or lessons from the 15 to 20 folks that have been on your couch or the conversations that you've had since your surgery, what do you feel like the collective healing need is?
We're all in grief,
Mm-hmm,
and I think we have such a fear-based relationship with death that um, it's almost impossible for us to collectively make friends with it.
mm-hmm,
Whether you're grieving someone you lost to death, or you're grieving a job or a spouse, or, a divorce, whatever,
mm-hmm,
it all creates grief. This lack of willingness to acknowledge that none of us are getting out of here alive.
mm-hmm.
I'm like, what if we stop pretending like we are? What if we stop pretending that we're going to get out, that we're all going to live forever? Because that's what we're doing.
Right.
We don't acknowledge that there's anything at the end. Like,
Like our
what's going
life
to happen to
compared to like
me?
the spectrum of time is so
Right,
minuscule.
exactly. And
Mm-hmm,
I was surprised. So I have this amazing oncologist, and when I went in and said, "Look, I'm not going to do chemo," that I would be shamed, that
mm-hmm,
they would try to talk me into it. And she not only didn't try to talk me into it, she embraced my decision, said, "We're here if you change your mind." And I said to her, I said, it's not like any of us are getting out of here alive, but I get to choose how
mm-hmm.
I go. Like, I maybe don't get to choose how I go. I get to choose my quality of life.
Yes.
And when I said none of us are getting out of here alive, she shared something with me. She said, like, she was like, this might, this might be kind of dark humor, but she said, we track everyone that we serve, all of our patients, and we track their lines. And there's always a line, like they started here and then they went up here, but eventually the lines converge. And I was like, exactly. Like,
Mm-hmm,
the line is always going to converge, that none of us will get
mm-hmm.
out of here alive. So what if conversations about death are really conversations about how we're living our lives?
Right.
So the beauty of what I have managed to create is that people will talk to me about death. People will have the people who sit on my couch, I think, probably come to me as much for what I can provide for them as what they,
Mm-hmm,
there's a definite exchange between us.
mm-hmm.
um but they i I think they feel safe talking about things that hurt, because that's who I am, that's where I live.
You're like a healthy container for that. I
Does that
know
answer your
that.
question?
That absolutely answers my question. My dad just finished up a round of chemo.
Yeah, I've been
He
paying
had
attention to
he
that.
had a pretty uh aggressive prostate cancer, and it's in his base of his spine and his femur.
I'm sorry.
Um, but he had a heart attack probably about like the Widowmaker, and his wife's a nurse, and so he actually had his heart attack while he was getting like tests. So he was in the hospital because she knew the signs. And so she took him to the hospital like ahead of time, ahead of what normally people would have gone. And like, he's like, since then, I mean, my days have been numbered anyway. Like he's, I'm here, and he's on some, androgen stuff, and it takes the testosterone out of the equation. So it doesn't feed it. And he's like, people have lived for like 10 years with this or 15 years. And I'm like, I know. Like, I mean, it's been some really cool conversations. We've had so many healing conversations. He wants to do he's a writer of his own sort and a minister, former minister. And so it's been really cool to have some really awesome conversations with him about it. And it's absolutely the choice of how you're going to live. My mom had blood clots after she got the vaccine. So after the second round, I think her body was trying to like manage the vaccine, and also like she had already started to look into possibly having blood clots. So I just think they couldn't do both at the same time. Personally, that's my scientific opinion around that. But even then, she's had some choices around what she does, how she spends her time, and I think if you let it, it could be like an invitation, right? Like everything can be either it's information, but everything can be like an invitation into something. And so you have to figure out what the invitation is for you in that moment and what that looks like.
And they're constant. They come constant.
And like we make all these agreements, I think, in the soul realm. And then we get mad as humans when we like the contract is like, remember what you said you were gonna
I
do.
know.
Like
I
it's
know.
like
Like
rage.
I'm like, who thought this was a good idea?
Why
You
did I
know,
sign
like
that? Soul
well,
contract.
we're sitting around in a circle and we all went, this would be fun. And
Just gonna break
oh,
generational curses. Be a friend to grief and death.
speaking of that though, I do feel like the tumor in my lung was generational.
Mm,
And that when that lung was removed,
hmm
something else was removed too. I don't know what it is, but I do feel like something left my body. My body was clear to me when I asked it, do you want this lung removed? Do you want
hmm
this? At the time, we thought it was just going to be we thought it was going to be a smaller surgery than it was.
hmm
But my body was clear. Yes, I, I want
I want that
to
out.
have this tumor taken out.
Hmm
My body was also clear about not having chemo. So, um, I just have this feeling that this wasn't mine
mm
and that there was something generational attached to it. I think it has to do with my mother, my mom's line,
hmm
and like something is not like there's this little switch that's been changed since I had this. You know,
I love that you can connect to that
more to come,
because
more to come. I
yeah,
guess
I know. I'm like,
we'll
I'm
see what
interested
else I
now. Is that in the
learn.
book?
Yeah, which book?
I know, right? So speaking of books, what is your like most proud moment? And I know you just participated in a book where you were writing for you, not necessarily ghostwriting, but like what's your proudest moment as an author, editor, writer?
So I would say, and I'll give you a little bit of background for this. So I've been writing all my life. It's just I got hired as a newspaper reporter with a 2-year associate's degree, and that was in the 80s. But I've been involved with Next Level
Mhm,
trainings, and Michael Strasner is a trainer for Next Level trainings. He does transformational trainings. And when Tracy and I were attending Next Level, we found out one of those weekends that Tracy had pancreatic cancer and that it was
mhm,
aggressive. And he and Michael Strasner, like, you know how sometimes people just fall in love immediately?
mhm,
Well, they fell in love immediately.
mhm,
And so I believe in Michael's work. I believe in what he does. And he came to see Trace. Trace was at hospice. I think it was, Trace died on Tuesday. I think this was like Friday morning or Saturday morning.
mhm.
Michael Strasser came to visit him. And by this point, like his voice was mostly gone. His arms were so skinny, and
Yeah.
Michael came and sat down next to him. And, Trace was a quintessential coach. He coached all the time. I constantly had to say, don't coach me. Um, but
I know
he
that
did like,
feeling.
Michael sat down next to him and Trace just like raised his little skinny arms up in the air for a hug. And Michael sat down and said, I'm going to dedicate my next book to you.
Mm,
So I walked him out and I said, I'm going to write that book. And he said, okay, I'll wait for you. And it was a good 6, 8 months before I was ready to have that conversation with him. But yeah,
Yeah.
so I wrote that book for him.
Yeah, I remember that. I have that book.
That was kind of,
And
I don't know.
I was really amazed at how, like, I don't think I understood ghostwriting. Like, I understood what it was like, but I don't think I understood the power of it and like how good exactly at it you were until I read that book. And I was like, oh, wow, this completely captures Michael Strassner.
Yeah, because you hear his voice in it.
Yes.
Yeah, that's always my goal when I
Brilliant.
ghostwrite for somebody is that their voice is there, not mine.
Mm. And I mean, what has so Tracy, I know you still connect with Tracy's ancestors and some of that line. Like, what has that allowed you to work, like the doing the death work, right? And the grief work? What has that allowed you to be connected to that you wouldn't have, without Tracy, or I could just say without
Um,
Tracy, really?
so I think so as I said, I've always been, death's kind of walked with me my whole life. I
Hmm.
lost my mom when I was 15. My brother died by suicide when I was 22.
Hmm.
Um, so I've always had this like understanding of death, and there's a thing with suicide that's like almost as if when you've lost someone to suicide, it's almost if your energy changes and other suicide loss survivors recognize you. So
Yeah.
that was kind of a thing that always happened. And I knew that collectively, like we suck at suicide. Like we just have
So
no
much
idea.
stigma and trauma
So
around
much
it.
stigma. We have no idea what to say to people. We
Right.
have no, like, I knew that was truth. Like there
Right.
was no question for me. And then when Trace got sick, um, and he got sick in first was diagnosed in October and he died in June.
Hmm.
Um, but I started noticing because I was actually doing I was on the board for Lost Community Services, which is local here in Columbus. They serve
Hmm.
people who have lost someone to suicide. Um, excuse me. So I was doing work with them, and I'm watching what happened with Tracy. Tracy decided to use his cancer for giving. Um, there's a I came home from the pharmacy one day and he was laying on our bed, and it was after his first chemo and before his second chemo, I believe. His first chemo was like the worst weekend in my life. I didn't know that somebody could be that sick and still be alive. Like I was like,
Mm.
we can't do this. They adjusted it, it got better for him. But so I come home and he's laying on our bed and he's got this mantra going that a friend of ours in Germany created for him. And he's
Hmm.
got my son's stuffed dog next to him and this like singing bowl that a friend brought back from Sedona. And he's laying on our bed and he's saying, yes, I will. And I walk in the room and he doesn't even know I'm there. So I'm just like wait to see what happens.
Observing.
Like, what are you doing? And he he opened his eyes and he was like, hey, baby. And I said, who are you talking to? And he said, he said, I was talking to God. I'm going to use my cancer for giving. And from then on, he started his whole name tag campaign back up and
Hmm.
it became a thing. But I didn't know, Karen, until Trace got sick that we don't collectively only suck at suicide death. We suck at death.
Yeah.
We don't know how to talk about it. We don't want to talk about it. We will do anything to stay. Like,
Hmm. Yep.
uh, I have seen people, I was at the hospital with Trace for his 9 months. Last year, one of my good friends got sick, and I've been her point person as she's gone through her own cancer and chemo, and just that's been a really hard journey
Surgery.
for
Yeah.
her.
She's had a rough road.
And um, and I see what people do to themselves to stay alive.
Yeah.
And a lot of that is what happened, with my decision to not have chemo. Like, I'm like, just not doing it. I'm just not doing it. Um, so you asked me a question and I was getting there, but I'm not sure. What did you ask me
I just
about?
asked what opened up,
Oh,
after.
about death.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Um, realizing that, so Tracy and I shared everything online, as you know.
Hmm. Hmm.
And what happened is it created vulnerability. It created transparency. The more we shared, the more other people shared. The more we shared, the more vulnerable we were, the more vulnerable people got.
Mhm.
And so, and that has continued, as I have continued to talk about grief and death and share my experience of grieving and all of the things that I've shared since Trace died. I just see that when I, when I'm vulnerable, other people are vulnerable, and it creates healing.
Mhm.
So really talking about death creates healing.
Yes. We've had many of
Hmm.
those talks,
Many of those
and
conversations, and you know it better than anybody.
yeah, it really does. And that's why I have you on here today. So we'll move it over to thank you for sharing all of that. I know I'm going to keep going back to this conversation and pulling all the nuggets when they're appropriate for me. So I want to do a situational hot seat,
Okay.
and this is where you get to turn the tables and you get to ask me about a situation, um, either true or imagined, and ask me what I would do about this situation. And then we can talk through what you did, what you would have done differently, any of that, whatever you want with it. But you got to give me the scenario.
Geez, there's so many. I'm going to stick in the death realm.
Ooh, okay.
Okay. So you're facilitating a support group
Hmm.
for people who have lost someone to suicide. They all come in first night, they're all strangers. And first night, they all tell their story.
Hmm.
It's a hard night the first night.
Hmm.
Someone in the group lost someone close to her who she hated. She's there for her healing,
Hmm.
but her experience is nearly 100% different than anybody else in the room.
Right.
And she is feeling alienated because everybody else misses their person. She doesn't.
Hmm.
How do you handle
Hmm. Wow. I I think, and it winds up being more work for you as a facilitator. I think you can always like, I don't think it's the time with the whole group, right? To be like, and let's just remember everybody doesn't love their person that died. Like that's not the time. So I think just giving that person some attention um in between sessions, or and just like kind of letting them, like being able to hold righteous rage um is big. I don't think, you think people aren't okay with death, people are not okay with rage. And like righteous rage especially, or like what feels like hate, right? Or what is really, because the closer you get to intolerability, and I imagine this person was at times um unfair and cruel to her, um the more intolerable it gets and the more you want like justice and fairness, right? So I think being able to be aware of that and like hold that space without judgment of um and I don't know how long that takes. I don't know how long that takes. I don't know how much she needs alone to feel like she gets that out. Because it's almost like you have to have a separate session for her alone after each session with everyone else. And then I think you ask the question, like, do you think this is supportive for you, or do you want to do some one-on-one type coaching? Like, do you want to be here for this weekend while everybody mourns and grieves the loss of someone that they loved or cared for? And figuring out if there are other people that can maybe be a support system, or if that's a specific subset of a grief support group, because this person wants healing. Is it something where they need something different, and trying to do that kind of with her in real time, because she's alone kind of in that situation. So I think you might have to get creative, and you definitely are going to have to get in your extra time with space holding bag, which can be exhausting as a facilitator and as someone who's trying to mitigate a lot of energies. I think that can be challenging, but I would probably just try to, be like, hey, I realize this. I understand where you're coming from. And like, let's figure out something that's going to be supportive for you and actually heal you.
it? Okay, well done.
Thanks. What'd you do?
Well, it's happened more than once.
Oh.
It's not really an uncommon scenario.
Hmm.
And I used it as an opportunity to, like, we all stayed in the room. Uh, uh, Actually, I just thought of it another time. Um, we banged it out together, all of us together in the room, and we really used it as an opportunity to drive home the understanding that no two griefs are alike,
Hmm.
and no two mourning experiences are alike. You and I've talked about this, but not people don't really understand that there's a difference between grief and mourning. That grief is all the external stuff or the internal stuff that you feel, like
Hmm.
you're grieving, you're crying, like that. Mourning is the outward expression of that grief, and we
Hmm.
don't do that. Like we're not taught to
We bottle
mourn.
that up.
We're like, oh, kick them out. Um, and
Then just
so
stays inside of you.
yeah,
Just
so
creates little
you can
gremlins.
yeah, and there is so much anger in suicide grief.
Hmm.
So we connected to the collective anger. Yeah, I'm pissed. I mean, my brother died by suicide in 1979. I'm still mad at him.
Right.
Not every day, but
A good bit.
So we connected to not comparing our grief because that doesn't serve anybody,
Hmm.
and connected to that shared anger, and you can just be as mad as you goddamn want to be.
Hmm.
And this is a safe space to do it. I wanted to make sure that they all understood that no matter what the grief was, this is a safe space, and we all we're here in it, and we're here together.
We're not judging somebody else's grief.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's and it's of course it's a learning experience. No two groups are alike,
Hmm.
but they are really healing for people. Everybody gets what they get. Everybody
All the
gets
loss
what
I've
they bring.
experienced, I've never been to that. But I think some of that is around like being the strong one and then, like I said, I have a therapist wife and a lot of people in my life that are space holders. So I think 2018 was that like year of grief for me where I stopped counting at 20. And a couple were to suicide. And that really shifted my whole mindset about suicide. Like I understand it so differently now, where I used to be really, really judgmental around it. And now I'm like, oh, like you get relief. And I understand that like grief and mourning are for the living, and
Mhm.
they're fine. Like they're great, actually.
Exactly.
We're just here stuck waiting on the unknown.
One of my
Um,
favorite songs is by a group called Purple Mountain,
mhm.
and the song is "Nights That Won't Happen." And one of my favorite lines is the dead know what they're doing when they leave this world behind.
They do.
Like, it's I listened to it before the podcast actually because I love that. It gets me in the mood.
All right. It gets me in the mood to talk about. Gotta get in that death mood. I watch Ghosts. No, I'm just kidding. Like
I
get me in
love
the
that
mood.
show.
Mm. Oh, I have to get that song from you. And what projects are you doing right now? If people want to connect with you, connect with your work, like how can people do that?
So I would say most of my writing is on Facebook and Instagram. Like
Hmm.
that's where it shows up.
It's nice and
Um,
free.
I have there's a book. Um, this is a book that came out. It's blurring it.
I was like there. I was like, you can
It's
do
called
the
it's called Lead Like a Woman, and
yeah.
it's stories about audacity. And my piece is called The Day I Decided to Give Myself Grace.
Mm,
Um, and I think leadership happens in all kinds of ways, and
yeah.
um, so I'm so busy healing right now that I don't have a lot going on. You know, but I am writing about this cancer journey,
Yeah.
and it's on my Facebook page is open.
Yeah.
Anybody can go. But I've been divorced, twice, and married one time that stuck. And so when I geez, when I created my Facebook page originally, I tried to put all my names in, and it said you have too many names. So, my
You
page
got
is like,
4 names on there. So it's
just like
Karen,
Karen Bolander, Mitchell,
Mitchell,
Austin, and then
Austin.
it has Ramirez in parentheses so that I
Yes.
can have like those are all my names.
And you're like, yes. Well,
And my Instagram
dynamic you
is
are, my
at
friend.
I'm Karen Austin. It's just I am Karen Austin.
Good. Well,
And
I
people can
love that
always
you have,
email me too.
I
That's
love
my email
that.
address.
I'm Karen Austin.
Yeah, Gmail. Yeah,
Yep. And I think, I don't know how, but I know we have some work to do together. So
no doubt.
that'll, that will happen.
And I don't know
Um,
how long I'm gonna be here, so
oh, you like, hurry up. Come on.
let's do
Heard
it.
and noted. And
I'm
I
kind of like your
think
dad at this moment. I'm kind of like, whatever comes now is a gift.
for sure. So yeah, I have some things in mind, but I gotta set up some infrastructure, but it's on the way. I promise you that. And yeah, so get in touch with you and also like give you room to heal. And I love that you're healing and I love that you heal so transparently and with us. Even when we don't talk for long periods of time, I do still feel like I get to witness you and witness your journey. And it is a beautiful journey and one of the most complex and nuanced journeys of life that I've ever seen. And I'm sure people probably think that about my life too, but
Yeah, they
I'm
did
just
because it is.
really, really grateful to know you and grateful to spend some time with you here. And
I'm so glad you asked
yeah, I
because
have
I
to
love talking about death,
I love talking about it because there's
even my own apparently. Like
right,
that.
like you're like, no death is off limits. No death is off limits. Any death, I'll talk about it. Bring it to me. But yeah, I have to come get on that couch soon. And thank you for
We'll
your
get on the couch.
time.
I want to tell you one thing before we go.
I want to hear it.
So, I've been in a lot of rooms with a lot of people who are waiting for cancer treatment,
Mhm.
and everybody gets to make their own choice. Everybody's making a choice.
Yeah.
But I will tell you that when I left my doctor's office, when I left the oncologist's office and walked into the waiting room,
Mhm.
in this waiting room that I have been in with my friend dozens of times over the last year, to the same floor where she gets her infusions. And I walked, after making that decision, I walked out of the oncologist's office into the waiting room. And I swear, Karen, it felt like I was in color and they were all in grayscale. And I remember thinking, I bet they were in color when they got here. We have this
Mm,
idea that we've been trained to have this idea that we should do things that hurt us
mm.
in order to get better. And I'm not sure that's true. So I
That's
just
so
want to say that.
powerful. No, I really appreciate you saying that. That's really powerful. And like that, think about the beauty industry, right? Pain is beauty. Um, and how long we've been socialized to think that we had to, even in just our expression and our appearance, that we had to experience pain to be beautiful.
Still.
It's such a mind fuck.
Mhm.
Hmm,
Yeah. So I'm gonna,
that's
I'm being color. That's my, like
I heard
I'm
that.
being in
You
color.
like, I'm gonna enjoy my quality of life, whatever little years I got left.
Exactly. Yep.
I'm gonna do that with a little razzle dazzle. All right, that's the word for the end of this. Thank you.
I love you.